Brisco and Bradshaw. I would be Bradshaw, and that would be the WWE Hall of Famer, Oklahoma's favorite son, Mr. Gerald Brisco. And there are many clotheslines. There's only one sickle. NWA Hall of Famer, George Tragos, Luthez Hall of Fame. He is Nikita Koloff. Nikita, welcome to the show.
Comrades, I love it, bro. Bradshaw and Brisco, I love it. I love it. This is great.
Well, you just got over with Bradshaw because you said his name first.
That's right. That's right.
Well, hey, he's been reading my publicity because it says, "Hey, there's a lot of clotheslines, only one sickle." He's been reading my publicity. That's right. That's right.
Well, he sure has, man. And what a lot of publicity you have, and man, and you know the great thing about these shows, as you're hosting a show too, which we'll get in a little bit later. You get to do research on guys that you really know, but during that research, you find out so many different things about a person, you know, that you don't talk about a lot in our business. But research on you, you know, found out a lot about you. And one thing that really amazes me and especially to have the talent that you develop in the ring, it's amazing that your first match that you had ever seen was the match that you were involved in. And to kind of take us through that, you grew up in Minnesota, in the hotbed, Robinsondale area, where every professional wrestler and his brother come from. And you grew up, and you admittedly said, I wasn't a big fan back in those days. How in the heck did you not become a fan, and what? And I know the animal story, but kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, which, by the way, let me just add, it is, I told John before we came on air, you know, just watched his career inside and outside the ring from afar. Of course, Jerry, I'm very familiar with yours, and certainly just nothing but the utmost respect for the two of you, for what you've accomplished, really both inside and outside the rings. I just want to say that at the onset as well. And but to address your question, to answer your question, yeah, the short story, the short version of that is, you know, I did grow up in the hotbed, you know, Robbinsdale, Minneapolis, Minnesota, all the guys that came out of there, and go all the way back to Jesse Ventura's little sweatbox gym in North Minneapolis when I was in junior college, and a bunch of us muscleheads were working there. And I had my first exposure to a live event when he was doing a deadlifting match against Paul Ellering, Precious Paul, at the St. Paul Civic Center. There were 18,000 people. There were 25 Jesse Ventura fans, and the rest were all Paul Ellering fans. And we were threatened. This is a true story. We were leaving the arena, and this old lady, she had to be 80 years old. She looked at, and somehow I made eye contact with her, and she looked at me and she said, You're those Jesse Ventura fans. If I had a knife, I'd stick it in your gut. I'd stick it in every one of theirs too. And I was like, whoa. Wow. I was like, these people take this stuff pretty serious, you know? So that was my one and only exposure to a professional match. And then, I was passionate about football, passionate about, playing in high school, college, and, scouted by the NFL my senior year, had a couple physical setbacks, some injuries, but that didn't deter me from wanting to go on. And then long and short of it is, eventually Joe Laurinaitis, AKA Road Warrior Animal, who I actually recruited out of New Brighton, Minnesota, Irondale High School, to play football, college football with me. We became the best of friends. He quit. I went on, finished, and graduated from college. He gets into professional wrestling. He makes the infamous phone call to share with me a storyline of a nephew for Ivan Koloff, legendary Ivan Koloff. And truthfully, the day I walked into Jim Crockett's office in June of 1984, started meeting guys, I didn't know them, probably the majority of them, for real, and so, they literally put me right in the interview set that day. Nikita Koloff's born in the hallways of Charlotte, North Carolina, in 1984. And then they said, Jim Crockett Jr. says, be in Raleigh tomorrow night, Thornton Arena. You're going to wrestle on television. No amateur background, no professional training. never been in a ring, and my debut was on television in a sold-out crowd in Raleigh, North Carolina.
And what were you thinking? I mean, what were you thinking about going into the ring? I mean, did they talk you into it right away? I mean, were you for this?
Well, I was. I mean, and we were supposed to get there early. We ended up getting there late. You know, I was along for the ride, so I'll say for the record, it wasn't my fault. We got there late. Jim Crockett started having started having some second thoughts, and he was not happy that we didn't get there to maybe get in the ring and do some things for them to show me some things. So they ended up showing me a couple things in the dressing room, believe it or not, guys. and my only instruction from Ivan was that apparently Jim Crockett said, Ivan, I'll let him do it, but if he trips on the ropes, getting in the ring, he's history. He's out of here. And I thought, how hard could that be? But man, as you guys know, if you've never climbed in a wrestling ring, that can be pretty challenging sometimes. So that was my mentality. I'm like, don't trip on the ropes. Don't trip on the ropes. And fortunately, guys, for me, it was a very short match. My first match, it lasted 11 seconds. The guy submitted, and the story was ready to be told.
Mr. Briscoe, as normal, you're sideways.
No, you're sideways.
No, I'm not. What are you? You had some Oklahoma special magic. What are you doing? The other way. There you go.
Nice.
Hey. This just blows me away, Nikita. Yeah. You got into a ring. I mean, in a packed arena full of people.
A TV match, John. His first match was a TV match, right?
Yeah, on television. Having never been in a ring before, right?
They showed you some stuff in the dressing room.
Yeah. How to tie. Here's how you tie up. Here's how you tie up. And you know, you're gonna do this. Now, you guys probably know the guy that I debuted against. Back in those days, he wrestled as Bret Hart, not the Hitman, but he went on to become Barry Horowitz. You guys probably know that.
Of course.
Winless Jack Hart.
Yeah, and 25 years later, I ran into Barry and I said, "Hey, Barry, I'd never asked you this question, but I'm curious. You know, you were my debut in wrestling. Did they happen to let you know the fact that I'd never been in the ring before?" And he's like, nope, they left that bit of information out. I go, well, fortunately, you survived to talk about it. So
yeah, that's just amazing, especially after the career that you went on to have after that. But you mentioned a couple of guys that you made tremendous road trips with, and as the three of us know, that's where you really learn. And you were in the Carolinas in those road trips. I mean, I went up and down. I went from Savannah, Georgia to Norfolk, Virginia.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? But yeah, nonstop. You know, I passed through Charlotte. I said, man, I'm going to stop at my apartment at least and freshen up. So I stopped there, took a quick shower, jumped back in the car, and drove another 6 hours to Norfolk, Virginia. But man, those road trips were brutal. But the great thing about them was after the matches were over, you got to sit in that car and gain all that knowledge. And you were two wonderful guys, Uncle Ivan and Don Cornoodle, I read or heard somewhere. Those two guys just have the knowledge that, you know, that they enjoy passing along.
Well, I did. And so that's the fortunate part, because probably the next question you might ask, or it's like, man, how did you learn? I mean, if you had no training, no professional training, no amateur wrestling background, you know, how'd you do it? So from that debut that night in Raleigh, and you're right, Jerry, I mean, back in those days, I mean, you could easily wrestle 7 nights a week, and we did. I mean, every night of the week. And then to Don and Ivan's credit, I give so much credit to them, as well as a number of other guys. But initially, Don and Ivan, because we would then get to the towns 2 or 3 hours early. They would bump and thump all over the ring, I call it, teaching me the mechanics of wrestling. I'd continue to have a really short match, you know, a minute or two maybe. And then they're the world tag team champions. So Uncle Ivan, my uncle, would sit in my corner, and then the nephew would sit the protege in their corner. I'd watch their match, you know, eyeball it right there from ringside every night. He'd eyeball mine, and then to your point, Jerry, every night on the drive home, wherever we were going, we would then talk about old school psychology of wrestling. So mechanics before the match, psychology after the match, discuss what they did in the ring. And we did that for about 2 or 3 months. And fortunately for me, I like to say I feel like I've always been coachable and teachable and just, adapted to it rather quickly.
And you talk about a great teacher, Ivan Koloff. For those that don't know, he was the 3rd WWF champion. He's the one that took the title off San Martino.
Oh,
I mean, he was
Madison Square Garden, legendary, right?
Yeah, he's one of the hottest heels in the country at the time.
Yes, yeah. So I feel very fortunate to have him and Don, so to speak, in my corner and to learn from those two men. Absolutely.
Well, Ivan, one of my all-time favorite. I had the great pleasure when I was a rookie, basically like you, only not quite as green. I got to go to Australia. Ivan was a big star down. He had just left New York, of course. Just getting into business in Oklahoma. I always read the after mags and all that. So of course you saw Ivan after beating Bruno all over the place. Usually a face of crimson mask, But I was in Australia and I was paired up with Ivan for about the first month that he was there. Elevating him or trying to get him ready for the next level matches. And the learning tree that I sat under there was Ivan Koloff. Still to this day, I think about Ivan, what he taught me, and I'm just thankful. So you had to feel the same thing. This guy, he had so much knowledge to pass on.
He did, and it really became, of course, how the fans are like, is he really your uncle? Well, yeah. he was as much an uncle outside the ring as any uncle I had, and of course, we went on to have a wonderful friendship well beyond wrestling. In fact, his wife had asked if I would speak at his graveside service upon his passing, and I was more than honored to do that. A very small, intimate crowd, and very honored to do that. So yeah, it was great. Now I will say too, let me just throw out there real quick for the record. The other fortunate thing I had that first year was in the ring with some guys that you guys would be very familiar with. I'm sure guys like Dory Funk Jr., Johnny Weaver, Rufus R. Freight Train Jones. I mean, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I mean, there were some guys I eventually got to get in the ring with, and then continue my education in wrestling with some of those legendary guys in their career as well. So
yeah, that Mid-Atlantic was loaded with legend, and some of them are so overlooked, like Johnny Weaver. In my opinion, Johnny Weaver is probably one of the greatest guys ever to step in a ring, not only in the ring, but outside the ring. The guy was so gracious and so giving. I mean, it was a pleasure to travel with Johnny and be around with Johnny. And if you wanted to learn, that was one of the guys to get in the ring with. And he was always there an hour or so ahead of time to help young guys gain their knowledge.
Yeah, and you said a key word, Jerry, that he was so giving. And here I'm so green that I don't know, there's a shade of green as far as green. John, you mentioned a green, right? But Johnny was gracious enough that when I'd have a match against him, of course, he had the legendary sleeper hold, right? Put guys out with that sleeper hold. He let me, he put that on me. He'd allow me to break it, and then eventually put him out, with that Russian sickle.
Wow,
and he's a brave man to take that Russian sickle back in those days. I'm just saying.
Wow. You're probably like me, Nikita. When you were real young and people took the clothesline or sickle from you, that they weren't very happy about it. As you got older, you learned more how to work it.
Well, some might argue that point, John, but I was intent on making it look good.
What was it about? Go ahead.
Just bringing up Weaver before we get off of Weaver. It was a great friend outside the ring, and what a fun guy to go to a pub with. Did you ever see Johnny Weaver clog dance?
I did not. I did not have that pleasure. I'm guessing he was good, huh?
Oh, he was the best. Well, I haven't seen a lot of cloggers, but the ones that I saw, Weaver was so good at. I mean, he would blow everybody's mind. And we go to a pub, and, you get back in West Virginia, hills and Virginia and Carolinas, man. And a lot of people did that old mountain clogging. And Weaver was everywhere he'd go, he'd be patted on the, after he'd finish clogging, his whole table be full of comp beers, from the fans there.
I can visualize that. No.
What in the world is clogging?
For real? Come on, tell him, Jerry.
Come on. He's a Texas boy. What do you expect questions like this from
we
him?
line danced. We didn't clog.
Well, that's where do you think that line dancing come from? What are you doing? You're moving you're stomping your feet in that line dance. That's what clog it is. It's just the rhythm of your feet there and make a noise there.
So
I can't believe. I'm sorry that John doesn't know what clock is. I apologize.
Hey, Jerry's got a valid point. I think I do that. I think line dancing came out of clogging. Was one of the original. So anyway, that's too funny.
Thank you. I just made up that line. Just make it.
So Jerry, are you a clogger?
I could do any dance you want me to do, man.
Go on, I believe that.
I get a little far water in me. I'm a dancing fool.
yeah. I've seen you. Mainly you do a war dance.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that's his specialty, the war dance.
Yeah. Well, when there needs rain down here in Florida, the city Chamber of Commerce called me, and I go down and do a rain dance for the city here.
I love it.
So what was it about Kernodle and Ivan that made them want to have you with them? I mean, I know you're friends with Joe Animal, and you were there. They'd seen you obviously a lot, but what made them think that first you wanted to be in the business, and second that you would be good in the business? I mean, it's kind of a risk on their part to bring somebody in that may or may not like the business, because your heart was going back to play professional football, right?
Yeah, it's a great question, and so a little quick backstory on that is for those who, your viewers, your listeners that may not know. So I'm at the time I'm training I graduate college. I'm in the gym, cranking it out hours a day, training for a pro football tryout. Animal makes that phone call, shares the storyline with me of a nephew, for Ivan Koloff, and I'm like, Joe, do they know I go, do they know I have no background, no training? He goes, yeah, I told him. I go, and they're okay with that? He goes, they say they are. I go, well, what do I got to do? He goes, call this promoter in Charlotte. Here's his number. So I call the number. Jim Crockett Jr. gets on the phone and introduced myself. And I said, now, Mr. Crockett, you understand, no amateur background, no professional training, right? He goes, yep. I go, and you're good with that? He goes, yep. And I go, okay. I go, well, what's the next step? Literally, he goes, well, be in my office with your head shaved bald. I go, that's it? He goes, yeah, be on this such and such a day. I go, okay. And I hung up the phone. And when Kernodle approached Don, see the original story came from Sergeant Slaughter and Don Kernodle one night from, you mentioned Savannah, Jerry. They're going from Savannah, I think, to Charleston on those long drives you were talking about. And they wrote out like a whole 2-year program, where Don would be a turncoat, partner with Ivan, and then eventually the nephew and uncle would turn on Don, and then Sergeant Slaughter would come in and Private Kernodle. They'd have matches for flags and belts and all kinds of stuff. Okay. And so when Don actually approached Animal, he asked this question: hey, do you know any big guys who wouldn't mind shaving their head and becoming a Russian? That was the question. And Joe goes, yeah, I think I know the guy right now. So all that to say, I had that 5-minute phone call with Crockett, hung up the phone. Months later, without another conversation, just showed up the day Jim Crockett said to be in his office, and Nikita Koloff's born. I mean,
so they had plenty of time to change your mind, is what you're saying, then, because there was months lapse by the time you showed up.
Yeah, I mean, they knew I was coming, and I showed up the day he said to be there, introduced myself, and he took a look at me, walked out, walked in, and he just like this said to Don and Ivan, take a look at your new partner. And Nikita's born, and the career is launched. But yeah, so Jimmy obviously took a risk, but while at the same time, it paid off for him,
I read where you're also taking courses on Russian, learning how to speak the language and all that, correct?
So I got my hands on a Russian workbook. Somewhere I found a Russian cassette tape that would teach me a few words and maybe some phrases. I learned to sign my name in Russian. I actually signed up for a propaganda magazine, a Russian propaganda magazine called Pravda.
Oh man.
Yeah, like for real.
You gotta be glad J. Edgar Hoover's dead.
Yeah,
I know, right? I'm just saying. And I thought, and so, and I didn't speak honestly, any English like we're talking now outside of the car I drove in and occasionally even in the dressing rooms, anywhere in public for over 6 months. And developing the accent and developing the character, I just went out and destroyed people every night. And then eventually, legally, changed my name to Nikita Koloff. They didn't ask me to do it. I just did it.
What was your thought process behind it? I mean, a lot of guys can never change their name. Some guys do. What was your thought process for wanting to change it?
My thought was I'm like, one day I'm going to be traveling or I'm going to get stopped, by a cop or something, and I thought when they look at my driver's license or look at my passport, I want them to see Nikita Koloff on there and go, wow, this dude really is Russian, and when I got an apartment in Charlotte and got a phone and electric and all, Ivan took me around everywhere. We told the same story everywhere. This is my nephew. He speaks no English. I'll co-sign for him, which he did. For an apartment, for a telephone, for electric, you name it. Yeah. But I just thought, and I didn't know I was doing it, guys, at the time. I didn't know this is what it was called. I came to learn later. I guess it's called method acting, where I just projected myself into that role to become that character, and just on my own decided to live it, eat it, sleep it, breathe it.
Well, I tell you, on my point of view, we're watching you. I mean, I've been around a lot of so-called Russian characters, and in our business. You totally, and I didn't know any of your background because I'd left Carolina. I didn't know your background. I was convinced even then that you were a bona fide Russian, and you know what, you did such a great job. You got heat with me being that Russian character, and because you were such a dominant force back then, and that evil Russian, and along with Ivan, and wow, what a tag team you guys became.
Well, I appreciate it. And you guys know a guy named Barry Darso.
Right.
And so, of course, Barry and I went to high school together. He graduated a year after me. We played on the same football team, along with several other guys who went on, into the bit. Kurt Hennig, Rick Rude, Darso, wow. John Nord. I mean, we were all on the same.
That's all one high school, right?
Yeah, it's all in high school. Yeah, it's all in high school.
Wow.
Tom Zink, Brady Boone. I mean, you just go down the list.
Yeah.
Darso was in the Mid-South wrestling with Nikolai for a while before we brought him into the Carolinas to team up with us as Crusher Khrushchev. And it's funny, when he came in, when we talked, he's like, same thing, Jerry. He goes, man, we heard there's this shoot Russian up in the Carolinas. He goes, I knew it. I should have known it was you, man. I should have known it was you.
Great.
So
wow.
He had no idea that it was his high school buddy that was the shoot Russian.
No idea until I called him and told him what I was doing. And he's like, that's great. Because I was that guy that believed you play like you practice. So in high school, I was all out 100% in practice, and my teammates did not like me. They're like, dude, chill out. It's practice. I'm like, you play like you practice, And Darso remembered that, right? So
yeah, John's got a great story about Howie Long and rookie Layfield trying to make the team. And what did Howie tell you that one day?
I called a slip cut, and it's basically a high-low block, and the guard goes through and the tackle cuts. It's illegal now, but back then it was technically legal. And right. I called slip cut, and how he looked up at me. He goes, John boy, he said, if you cut me in practice, it's going to be a long day. I said, Mr. Long, I wouldn't dream of cutting you, sir. And I just ducked my shoulder, and he just moved with me. He worked with me. It was great.
That's awesome.
As long as I wasn't trying to make the team off of him, he was fine.
That's all. What a great story.
Nikki, how long was it when you got in the business? Did you feel comfortable sitting in the dressing room and suggesting things, or was you that rookie that just kept your mouth shut the entire year, or was you out there saying, "How about this?" Or anything?
No, I was just a sponge. It's a great question. I was just a sponge and willing to to learn from everyone that I could learn from, and just to try to perfect the craft and perfect the character. And when I think about, when I look back on it, from that night I debuted in the Dorton Arena, which I'm sure you've been many a times, Jerry. That night I debuted there. I mean, fast forward 13 months, and at that point, I'm the world tag team champion, world 6-man champion. I'm getting my first crack ever at a blonde-haired guy named Ric Flair for the world heavyweight title at the first Great American Bash, in front of however many, 25, 30, 35,000 people, all within 13 months, almost to the day.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you were still that sponge sitting in the corner there, absorbing everything.
Absolutely. I just want to learn. And as I'm sure you're very familiar with from the old school days, going out and peeking out, or going out and watching some of the other matches that were out there. Yeah. And just watching those matches and trying to learn what other guys were doing, and just remain coachable and teachable,
Well, from the little things that you're saying, those are the things that really set a talent apart from others. The guys that go out and look through that curtain, the guys that sit in that dressing room and eavesdrop on the match before you. Well, what do you think? And get that comparison, all that stuff. And also to make sure that you're not copying what they're doing out there, but you were one of those monsters that went out, and that's another amazing thing. With your lack of experience, you transcended so rapidly from just being that brutalized killer, go out and just thrashing guys, to the guy who be able to go and have a 60-minute match with Ric Flair. That must have been an experience right there, because you just can't bash and kick and punch. You got to follow the leader out there, and that champion's a wrestler, so you had to adapt real quick, and you made that transition so quick.
I did. Well, and again, to Rick's credit, and Ricky Steamboat, and eventually Dusty and others who I got to be in the ring. I can't count how many 60-minute Broadways I had against Rick. So I had enough that there's more than I can count.
Yeah.
And to your point, right, you just can't, just pound on a guy for 60 minutes. You got to be able to go out there, work some holds, develop your psychology, listen to the crowd, and develop all of that. And so I feel very fortunate to with guys like Rick and these others, to be able to learn that from, and have a 60-minute match, or a 45-minute match, or a half-hour match, or eventually Magnum TA and some of the others that I feel I had really great chemistry with, and told a great story each night to the crowd. So yeah, I'm very fortunate, the guys I got in the ring with.
And that was a great thing that Crockett did back in those days. He made sure the matches that were drawing the money put their time in to satisfy the people. Right. So that gave you that experience of getting the time in and pacing yourself.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That was one of the differences, Jerry, during the Attitude Era. When we were in the war with WCW, right. We had Stone Cold, The Rock, and Undertaker on top, and you couldn't talk those guys into not doing 30 minutes right. plus every single night. It's when the main event delivers, your territory is just on fire, and it says so much about you, Nikita. It's one of the reasons people still talk about you 30 years after you've been in the ring, that it's a really hard transition, and a lot of guys never make it from being that monster that can just go out and squash people and kill people, to becoming a worker that can work a match with a Ricky Steamboat and a Ric Flair.
Well, and I will say, on a very transparent note, I wasn't the most polished worker in the business, but I wanted to learn, and I was again coachable. I feel teachable, and no matter, even through the entirety of my career, which you mentioned, John, 30 years later, people still talking about it. What I don't think some people understand is, I broke in June of 1984 under my own terms. I chose to walk away in November of 1992. So I didn't have that long a career. And there was a hiatus in there where I stepped away. I had a wife that passed, of cancer. And so I stepped away from main event wrestling to take care of her. While I was in main event matches, I said, I'm going to take a sabbatical, and she said first priority. So that even shortened my career. And so some have, termed my career, the that I'm the Barry Sanders of pro wrestling in a sense, if you will, that I walked away kind of on top, wasn't there for as long as I potentially could have been. And so talk about very humbling that 30 years later, people are still talking about it. We're doing this interview today is pretty amazing to me. It really is.
Yeah, I was amazed when I saw that basically you had a 6 or 7 year career, because when you count the hiatus to take off to take care of your wife, which
yes, sir,
a pretty cool thing to do.
Yep.
And I saw an interview you did that you said you wanted to retire when you were 35, but every wrestler says that when they're 25.
Hey, so here's what's funny about that, John. And I told Don and Ivan, like, we argued about this for about 2 weeks, my first 2 weeks in the business. I'm like, hey guys, I'm going to be retired out of active wrestling by the time I'm 35. And Kernodle especially, he's like, it'll get in your blood. No, you won't. You'll go. I just got tired of arguing with him. I just went, okay, all right, you'll see. And so, yeah, I mean, my last match, November 92, I'm at that point, I'm 33, Big Van Vader. I did sustain a couple of injuries, not career ending, but I sustained a couple of injuries. It was over Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. And I'm like, hey, I'm getting ready to turn 34. What's the point of going back for, a few months or something? I'm done. So I just said, no, I'm done. No fanfare. No, I just said, I'm done.
And the storyline was that Van Vader retired you, but that was the storyline. It was not.
Yeah, they played off, and he did injure me. He injured my neck. I actually didn't know till the next day. He's a big dude, right? I mean, he's a big guy. I found I got a hernia from picking him up, for body slam, and, big dude, right? So I did sustain and I ended up having the hernia surgery, rehabbing my neck. And I knew, I had heard that they played off that, like, yeah, I put Nikita Koloff out of wrestling. I'm like, whatever, that's good. If that works for you, run with it, go for it. Hopefully draw some money for you guys,
Did you ever have a knack or desire to get back, or a storyline? Because you had to obviously somebody had to call you with some storylines or something to get back in the ring. Did you ever think, you know what, I might do that?
I've never had a second thought of getting back in the ring. Probably the closest as far as like someone wanting me to, Jeff Jarrett, when he launched TNA. I was actually living in Nashville at the time for just a couple of years there when they launched it. And I did go in, I wanted to help them out. I did about 4 shows for them. I did some fun stuff. I came under the hood as Mr. Wrestling number 4 and, jumped on Dusty and just did a couple things there. And Jarrett's like, come on, get back in the ring. We'll put you in a 6-man. You can stand on the apron. You don't even have to do anything. I'm like, no, the Russian Nightmare's not going to stand on the apron. I look like an idiot. Come on, Jeff. Are you kidding me? I go, Jeff, thank you, but no thank you. I'm just not into. I want to be one of the few guys that retires and stay retired. I want to be in that category. And because, I get to do the legends and signings and different things I get to do and mix it up with the fans still. That's honestly been enough for me without having to don the tights or do a one-off or something like that, so I'm thrilled for the career I had, but yeah, don't need to put those tights on. Go on YouTube. I tell people, watch me. Tights.
When you got into the business, from that phone call, when Animal called it, did you think, well, yeah, I'll try this. I got an exit plan in 10 years. I mean, that was my exit plan. I was a college kid. I wanted to go coach and teach and all that stuff. I'm going to stay in this business 10 years. I'm going to save all my money. Then I'm going to go and coach and teach the rest of my life. And little of that, I know 50 years later, here I
did actually. In my mind, if I go back all the way to the age of 12, when I picked up a bodybuilding magazine called Iron Man, I kind of formulated my whole life plan at age 12, right? I'm gonna get into bodybuilding. I'm gonna play football, high school, college, professional for maybe a 10-year career. I got I majored in college in physical education. I got a minor in coaching and health, and I thought, once I retire, I'll walk away from the NFL on top of the game. I'll go into coaching in college, maybe have a little pro career, coaching career, and then sail off into the sunset. Little knowing. But even when I came to Charlotte, I thought, if it doesn't work out, I still got to try out, but I never looked back because the career was so meteoric. I never gave football a second thought, just never looked back on it.
Coming into the business, and we all know the locker room is an unforgiving place for rookies and young guys. Here you are with absolutely zero experience, and you're thrust into the main event with one of the hottest programs and with one of the hottest all-time heels, Ivan, your Uncle Ivan there. Well, did you ever feel any animosity in the dressing room, and how was that handled?
Well, that's a great question.
That's a yes.
Yeah.
Now, most of it was unspoken. However, as you guys know, in the dressing rooms, and you can sense certain things or that sort of thing. Two different times. One, right away, early in the career, Ivan was great about that. Let's go back to Ivan just for a second. He was so great about that. Man, he'd come up there because he knew he was probably hearing things that I wasn't even hearing. But I remember him saying to me, he's like, Nikki, he's like, look, obviously you didn't pay your dues in the ring. You hadn't, cut your teeth in all these territories or whatever, but you got a break. You're taking advantage of that break. You put your sweat equity in the gym, obviously. Look at you, and at the time, and I was pounded into the gym. He goes, so you paid your dues in other ways. So don't let that bother you. You stay focused on what you're doing and just let that slide right off your back, so to speak. And so he was instrumental early on. And then the second time I felt some of that animosity was when we did the switch, and I'm going to become Dusty Rhodes' a super power partner, and it was billed as the mystery man, and it was, I think, still to this day, one of the best kept secrets. I don't know that anybody knew up until the night I walked into the dressing room who was actually going to be his mystery partner. They hadn't said a word, I don't think,
wow,
to anybody. And we all agreed on that. In fact, I didn't even say anything to Ivan. They're like, hey, let's keep it between, the three of us, Jim Crockett, Dusty, and I. And as far as I know, I did. So I think they did. But anyway, so you could cut that dressing room, or you could cut the air with a knife in that dressing room. One night I walked, and they got their aha moment. Like, he's the guy. He's the guy that's going to be teaming with the Booker.
Yeah.
No animosity there.
Yeah. No animosity. No pressure there. And speaking of pressure, you're coming from college football basically, and all of a sudden, that first time that you walk into that Moorhead Drive office there, and Jim Crockett hands you a check, and you look at all those zeros on that check, you had so much for that exit plan, right?
Well, yeah, the fact you still remember the street name. Now, I remember South Boulevard.
Yeah.
Because it was funny when I drove into Charlotte, I didn't have a clue where to go. Look, there wasn't GPS back in those days. It was a Rand McNally map, right, Jerry? And I literally remember, I can visualize right now. I drove in up 85, came up from Atlanta, and I'm driving, I'm like passing the city, and I'm like, the same gas station with the same pay phone is still there, where I put a quarter in and called the office. I'm like, hey, I'm supposed to meet Jim Crockett today. I'll come back to Billy Graham Boulevard, turn on South Boulevard, and there you're there. So the funny part is, and here's the legit, okay, and you guys already know that. I know you do, Jerry. Our guarantee was $50 a night.
Right.
Remember those days, Jerry? 50.
Yeah.
$50. And TV was $40 guarantee.
40, yeah.
$40.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I probably still have pay stubs somewhere where I worked 7 nights and my check was $340.
Yeah.
For 7 nights of work.
I remember those nights.
I'm sure you do. Now, eventually, there were a few zeros that were added to those numbers, and then yes, to your point. In fact, I don't know who the CPA was back in those days. I just remember his first name, Dave. Dave came to me one time and he goes, hey, cash your checks. I'm like, Dave, what are you talking about? He goes, you're messing up my book. My booking, cash your check. I go, what are you talking about? He goes, go, you're not cashing check. And I literally, guys, I went, I would get it. I would get, we got paid a thing weekly. I throw it up on my closet shelf, and I went, I had, at the most I had at one time was 13 uncashed checks.
Wow.
13. And so I'm like, oh, I should probably cash these checks. So
to
yeah,
this day, if I ever get a check, I'll cash it first thing in the morning.
well, things have changed. You want to make sure it clears now, right?
It's just an old habit, though. These old wrestling promoters used to give you a check, and you're like, I'm going to be there first thing in the morning to cash this check. Somebody else's check's going to bounce, not mine.
Let's just say I had a lot of faith and trust in Jim Crockett Promotions. Yeah. Let's just say that.
The one thing I saw that was sorry, I thought Jerry was saying something. The one thing I saw was so cute, was so cool, was the Rocky IV movie that you went and did. And there are two things I loved about it, because I was friends with Kerry Von Erich. It was a great Kerry story of not knowing his lines.
Yeah.
But the other thing was you stayed in character the entire time you were on the set.
I did. Talking
That's
to Stallone,
awesome.
directors, limousine driver, you name it. I'm telling you guys, I never broke character anywhere in public, including on that set. So I delivered my lines just like the Russian Nightmare Nikita Koloff, with that same accent. Stallone and I are carrying on a conversation about boxing and pulling punches, and did not break character. Bridget Nielsen was on the set. I just stayed character the whole time. Yeah. It was just a mindset.
And Kerry knew all his lines very well, right?
Oh my gosh. I'm like, well,
I love Kerry. When I heard that story, I saw you on the video, I just thought, that's Kerry. That's Kerry.
Right? I'm like, well, my odds just went up from 33% to 50-50 shot and get this role. I've got Kerry. They sent him to us like a month ago, dude. How do you not have lines? How do you not know? I'm like, well, all right, here we go. So
do you think Sly set you up with that movement, or do you have to get Dolph in, or you think it was just him trying to visualize being a director?
Well, I think so. What
tell
happened
tell the story. Yeah, please tell the story.
Yeah. So what happened is, I drew the short straw. So it's me, Kerry, and Lundgren, Dolph Lundgren. It's between the three of us. I mean, we're there. We're Stallone, and we're gonna screen test and do the whole deal in the studio, the little warehouse there in Hollywood. And I drew the short straw. I had to go first. I'm like, oh, great, but I'm like, all right, I've been under pressure before. And so I deliver the lines just the way they gave me, word for word, man. It just the projecting to who the audience I was supposed to be talking to. And then Stallone says, hey, let's do one more. And I, you and I side by side, finish it halfway through. Let's turn towards each other, do a nose to nose stare down. You finish the lines, but let's do it. And I'm like, okay, you can do it. He goes, but finish your lines. And so we do. I'm delivering the lines. I turn halfway, stare down, nose to nose, and they all cut. He says, how was it? And I don't know, for those who've never met Stallone, I mean, he's not, he looked ripped. He was ripped, but he looked big on the silver screen, right? But he's every bit of 5'6". And back then he was about $160, about 160 pounds. I'm 285, 8% body fat, jacked, right? And so in comparison, we're standing there, and the director, I'll never forget it, word for word, quote unquote. He says, well, it looked really good until you turn towards each other. And then because of the lighting in the studios and what they're looking at on their screens, he goes, we lost you in his shadow.
Oh, wow.
And I thought two things immediately, for real. I thought, not good for his ego, not good for my opportunity, And then fast forward real quick, the rest of that story, the director called me a couple weeks later, and he goes, Nikita, man, if it was based on delivery of the lines, you'd have it hands down. However, unfortunately, the Rocky character is 35 years old in the movie. You're so big, and you look even bigger on the silver screen. It'd just be, even for Hollywood, too unbelievable for his character to be the guy that looks like you. And so, and Lundgren was only about 205 pounds, a little bit taller. And there's some other political things at work there, where some people he knew had invested in the movie. So there's some other things at work there too. So Yep, that's the story.
Yeah.
That's surprising.
And what was the deal? His manager ended up taking your name.
Yeah, and that was a wrestling fan that just enlightened me that just a couple years ago.
Wow.
They're like, hey, they're like, hope you got royalties on this. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, yeah, his manager in the movie was named Nikita, and then of course Ivan Drago and Nikita, whatever the manager's last. I'm like, really, Sly? Really? You're gonna use our names and not get any credit, royalties, nothing. Okay, I get it. Yeah,
that's great.
Ivan Von Erich.
Yeah.
right. So
he couldn't remember Von Erich.
Did you ever talk to Kerry about the thing, how it went? Did you see it?
I mean, I saw the movie. It's a great movie.
No. I'm sorry. Did you talk to Kerry Von Erich about
Kerry's audition?
No, actually, because I actually got whisked off to the airport. I had to catch a flight. I was booked in some more matches, so wow. I flew in, did the interview, did the audition, and then they whisked me off to the. So I never got to see him or Lundgren's audition. I wish I would. Well, I'll say this: Lundgren went second. Okay, I remember now. Lundgren went second. As I'm departing, I'm hearing him deliver his lines. I'm like, man, I should get this thing, because I'm like, But anyway, and fortunately, he had very few lines for Lundgren. So
Dusty helped you get there for the test, right? Because Jim Crockett didn't want you to do it.
Yeah, he's like, man, if he gets this role, we invested all this time and money in this guy, and then Dusty's like, Jimmy, if he gets this role, dude, that's only a short season. Our business will blow up if he gets this role. Are you kidding me? Let him go out and do it. So, yeah. And again, Cornota was instrumental in helping with that because Terry Funk, who was friends with Stallone, called Don and said, hey, you got this Russian guy in Charlotte. Can he screen to, so.
Did you ever have a chance for other movies? I mean, you seem like you're perfect made for movies. Did you not want to pursue it? Did you not have opportunities? What was the reason that you didn't go and do more in Hollywood?
Just the other things that kind of unfolded in my life. I have done I've done about three, let's see, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 smaller budget Christian films over the years with more cameo type appearances, smaller roles that I've done, and it was fun. But I have to say, even doing those in a smaller role, I'm like, yeah, I don't know that the movie thing is for me. I mean, it certainly I probably could have learned it like I learned everything else, but and then there was just a different path that I took and a different plan for my life. So yeah, so movies wasn't really up there at the top of the list.
One thing that you ask when you're older and you worked some territories and not other territories is who would you like to have worked with? To me, it's always been Magnum TA. He was such a great babyface. I was always a heel. He was a big guy. I could have begged off from him. I just thought you guys had a match made in heaven, right?
We did. We had, and you guys would have had great. Yeah, you would have had great chemistry. Your style, your brand of wrestling, and his would have matched up really, really well. And yeah, we just had such just great chemistry with each other. From the physicality of it and the agreement that, hey, I work as I'll call it snug. Some would say stiff. In Jerry's era, it would have been a crowbar. But my mindset was this has to look believable to the fans. And Magnum had that same mindset. In fact, I've heard from numerous fans since then. They'd walk out of the arena that night and go, I don't know about any of those other matches, but that match against Nikita and Magnum was real. That match was real. And that was our goal. Our goal was to bring the believability, realism, even though there was a kind of a mystery around wrestling, that our goal was when fans left that night, that's what we hoped to accomplish. And that's what he and I did. And we had such great camaraderie with each other. And chemistry with each other that it came across and the fans loved it, bought into it.
They've done
John, an important part of that thing. Now, Magnum had much more matches than you, but yearly wise, you guys were not too far off in the amount of years you've been there, but the amount of matches was really tilted on his side there.
It did, and I didn't realize until he recently had shared with me. We were doing a kind of a road stories thing, he and I together just a while back, and was sharing with that crowd that a very similar. The only difference being is, of course, he had an amateur wrestling background,
right,
so I didn't have that, and he was a great amateur wrestler,
right?
And he went out to Portland with Buzz Sawyer and Don Owens. And so he got experience in Portland, experience in the Mid-South before he came to the Carolinas. So yes, to your point, Jerry, he had a lot of matches already under his belt, even though he didn't really have any professional training, right, and he had that amateur background. So right, his story is probably as close to mine as you would have with those exceptions.
And the best of 7, they've done it since, but you guys were the standard bearer. I mean, you guys set the watermark for everybody that came after you. It was so well done how you you start off 3-0, then he comes back. Great underdog story. No, heck no. Let's, as Skandor Akbar used to say, let's leave them happy, miserable.
I love it. And I will say, often imitated, never duplicated. Hey, they can try to have more best of 7s. Yeah. They'll never duplicate the original. I'm just saying.
I think really what set that thing off is you jumping out to that 3-0 lead, and people, wow, one more match, and that's it. And Terry fall back, true babyface form, and was able to do it there.
The ultimate underdog story, as John
said.
But
the building of that story, the booking, I mean, that's one thing Dusty, or all of our friends there, to Dusty, he had that knowledge and that mind that could visualize all 7 of those matches. How are we going to go, baby? How are we going to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so much credit, and for everything from the best of 7 to War Games, a Great American Bash, and eventually Great Bash Tour, to even some of the things I did with him, the arm wrestling thing early on, and then the whole superpower. I mean, when him and Jimmy approached me about becoming a babyface, I'm like, but in my mind, I'm like, well, the two of them got way more experience than me at this point, because I'm still less than 3 years in the business.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, let's, and if they're willing to roll the dice on this, like they were, and when I my career first started, why not? Let's give it sure. Let's do it. Let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens.
Now you were there obviously when Terry had the accident, correct?
So here's the funny part of that story. I was on a tour in Japan. And of course, there's not internet, there's none of that. When I got back, I still remember my first night back was in Philadelphia. Jimmy and Dusty brought me into a room, told me about the accident. And, I thought they're working me, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Yeah, right. They're like, no, like it took a few minutes to convince me, no, this is on the level. We're shooting. No, he's in the hospital fighting for his life right now. And then, so it took me a few minutes to let that kind of settle in. And then once it did, I was like, wow, okay, all right. And then they shared the idea of becoming Dusty's, mystery partner and all that. And, and gave me the option. Do you want to do this? I don't think a Russian's ever been a babyface before, but we think it might work,
when WWE ended up buying WCW, they got the franchises there, so they got Great American Bash was one of the franchises that WWE got as part of. So my first big pay-per-view title match, we were at Great American Bash. Dusty was working, I think, for Impact Wrestling or TNA at the time. And we had a bull rope match, me and Eddie Guerrero. And Vince McMahon told Bruce Pritchard, he goes, call Dusty and get a finish. So literally, Bruce Pritchard calls Dusty. Dusty gives us a finish for the Great American Bash.
Come on.
In WWE.
That's a great story. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Dusty was so great. Did you have any trepidation at all? Because you were such a freaking hot heel. Did you have any trepidation at all about turning and going with the American Dream?
Of course, there was probably some natural, apprehension as to whether or not it would actually work. But again, here goes just a level of trust and faith in these guys who have been around the business way longer than I have. I'm like, well, if they think can work, then then why not? And so, and of course, then what happened that night is everyone has witnessed through video and other, and those who've actually, I've met people who literally were there that night. And, of course, the people, the people just hook, line, and sinker just embraced it. And then the rest, as the old cliche goes, the rest was history.
I really like to plug that. If people that hadn't watched what we're talking about, go to YouTube and type that in. I watched it last night. I got to admit, for the very first time, and I was like a fan sitting there. And I just wow, because you were such a unbelievable strong ass heel, and all of a sudden here you are. And it's goosebumps to watch the thing. So if you want a thrill, go to YouTube and watch it. It's fantastic.
And it's got to make you feel incredible, Nikita. That, I mean, there's few things in wrestling that, stand the test of time decades later. Hogan slamming the Giant and Bruno winning the title. You coming out with Dusty's partner is one of those things. And people are going to talk about that forever. That's got to make you feel really cool that, we hit a grand slam that night.
Yeah, it was the best word. If I were to summarize it in one word, the best word I come up is surreal. Only because how the people embraced it, and in fact, I verified this with Tony Schiavone actually just recently. I'd always heard they had asked him, and let's face it, Tony's been around some incredible matches over the course of his career as an announcer, right? And they said, "Hey, what was the biggest pop you ever witnessed in your career as an announcer?" He said, "The night Nikita Koloff turned babyface."
Wow.
It was and you want to talk about a very humbling, coming from a guy like Tony, who's been around some of the greatest matches, and I was on his podcast interviewing with him, and I asked him, I go, "Tony, is this true? I've heard this. Is this true? Did you say this? Have you?" He goes, 100%. He goes, "To this day," he goes, "it was by far, I've never heard." And so, Jerry, so those who maybe have never watched it, they'll go back and now get to experience that and see the organic explosion.
Wow.
In that, when I tore into Ole Anderson that night, and the way we projected it, pausing in the doorway of the cage, and just looking around, and with them still uncertain of what Nikita was going to do, and then Dusty as the biggest cheerleader for what seemed to be the next 10 minutes, people in the auditorium, same people who hated me the month before, were throwing stuff at me, letting me know I'm number one in their hearts, so to speak, wink, wink. To be in those stands with their shirts off, they're doing my most muscular, they're chanting Nikita was crazy. It was just surreal.
Wow.
It was surreal.
Yeah.
Yep.
Isn't it amazing though? The best turns are from the hottest heels.
That's how
the best betrayals from the hottest baby faces.
Yes. Yeah, the old adage, right? The old that's old school, right, Jerry? That's old school. Right?
Yeah. You get over first as a character, then when you make that change, I'm not going to put our turn in similar, but Jack and I had been a baby face there forever, and Cornoodle and Sarge had worked with Ricky and Jay and had blowout record houses everywhere they went. So Ricky and Jay were looking for a tag team, and at the time there were a lot of recycled guys in the territory, and we were babyface and going up and down the road. But one night we started adult beverages, and Ricky, "Hey, how about you guys turning heel?" "Well, I don't know, Jack. Yeah, let's try it." So convincing Jimmy Crockett to doing it, it'll never work. It's kind of probably like a deal. Finally, we convinced Crockett to do it, but when we turned heel, I mean, it was just wow. Because we're over as strong as baby faces, to make that switch, it just disappointed the people, so to say. Where you, on the other hand, you're making the people jubilant and really happy what you did. But yeah, it's a challenge to do that, and it's always fascinating to see how it turns out there.
Yep, absolutely. So
you just went to your true character, Jerry. You went to being a heel from Oklahoma.
Yeah, I love being.
That's not a stretch, Jerry. That's not a stretch at all.
That's the reason I love being a heel so much. I can just be natural. I can be me.
Nikita, did you ever have any thoughts about going to New York during this time?
I did. I met Vince one time in a gym in Vegas. We're doing a head-to-head show one night. Just randomly met him in the gym. He happened to be in there, the same gym I walked into, introduced ourselves, had a short, cordial conversation. Never had another conversation from that. I joke and I say, for those who are old enough to remember those recorders, like somebody call your house line and leave a message and you get the red flashing light. Well, if they ever left me a message, apparently it got erased or I never heard it, right? If the office ever tried to reach out to me, Darso, when he informed Ivan and I that he was going to head that way and form Demolition, had asked me, was I interested? Was I interested in going with him and being part of Demolition? And, I honestly didn't give it a whole lot of thought for a couple reasons. One, as we've described today, I worked so hard on my character and the development of it that I really didn't want to go and become another character or do something else. And then secondly, the Road Warriors, right? I just felt like it was kind of a, if you want to say maybe a spinoff, and I such good friendship with Joe and eventually Mike, that I don't want them guys mad at me, in any way, shape, or form. And so out of respect for them, last but not least, I felt honestly a real loyalty to Jim Crockett in the NWA because of the opportunity they gave me, of which we just described how I broke in. And anybody who knows me, spends any time around me, I'm probably loyal to a fault. And so, I've just been, NWA for life, so to speak, and never really gave thought to go anywhere else. Even though I did some things like with AWA, but that was kind of cult, Jimmy's Blessing and Mid-South, but I wasn't really in their territories. I just came in to try to help Vern and wrestle as a Brisco for his title, to keep them afloat for a while and that sort of thing. But all in all, overall, NWA, just a loyal because of the opportunity they gave me, and so never really gave a whole lot of thought to going up to Vince McMahon, WWF or WWE or anywhere else at the time.
If anywhere else, you were such a natural to go to Japan. I mean, their size, your style of work, that aggressive style of work. Were there ever any ovations towards them getting you over to Japan on a permanent basis, kind of like Hansen or Brody?
I mean, I did several tours over there, shorter tours, and not the typical month tours that everyone would do. And I had the leverage to be able to do that, so I went like maybe a week at the most, 2 weeks at a time, and enjoyed the time over there. I was with Baba's organization. And enjoyed that time, but no real talks or negotiations of being another Stan Hansen and just kind of almost that being my career in Japan. Although I enjoy Ricky Choshu and all the guys and Jumbo Tsuruta and wrestling all the guys I wrestled, certainly could see how it would have fit in, but didn't really entertain that idea either. No.
Stan holds the record on our podcast for taking the longest to get home.
That's
I love Stan. Stan's been wonderful to me, and I treat him like an older brother or a great uncle. I think the world of Stan. But we had an hour of Stan cursing with his grandkids and his wife, trying to get him on Zoom. It was possibly the greatest hour of my life.
and the great thing about that, Nicky, is John's such a huge fan of Stan's, and and every time Stan would start getting disappointed, you'd see that diplomat Layfield come out. Well, Stan, let's back up a little bit. I mean, watching him try to talk Stan on getting on the internet on Zoom calls, and just and we use that word, but marking out for Stan Hansen there, and it was so fun to just see the respect that my partner had for a guy like Stan Hansen. I mean, how can you not, though? Stan, one of the greatest guys that ever blessed our business.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
One of the best nights of my life. We were, I think, in Budokan in Tokyo, and I walked in to Stan. We were working that night, and I said, "Stan, what do you want to do?" He goes, "Well, how about I duck yours and hit you with mine?" All right, that sounds good. I'll see you out there.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So good. Hey, what was in the water in Minnesota? I trained with Brad Ragans up in Hamel, right there in Minnesota, and I went to the gym. It was the gym. I don't know if it was what it was, but they had all these bench press world records. You had all these. I mean, Rude was a national level arm wrestler. Scott Norton, world class, world champion arm wrestler. What was in the water up there in Minnesota?
Dude, it was crazy. Jim Youngner, again, another Robbinsdale High School grad, graduated a year ahead of me. And so again, if you can picture, so he had Rude, Henning, Nikita, Darso, and John Nord all on the same football team, right? And and then Jim Youngner, who played football with us as well, but graduating high school, he started the gym, and it just became it was called the Mecca of the Midwest. Let's add to that Mr. Minnesota's. Let's add, Tom Zink, right? Mr. Minnesota. Right. Let's add Ms. USA's, Mr. USA's. I mean, bodybuilding records, powerlifting records. Some people don't know, but Darso and Wayne Bloom, who also went into wrestling. At one point, those guys had the 2-man world deadlift record, 1,300 and something pounds, the world 2-man deadlift record. So yeah, I don't know. It was just, we started real young. We had a mentor by the name of Jerry McFarland in junior high school, who was a health teacher and a professional bodybuilder. And we all just gravitated to Jerry McFarland, good Scottish name, right? And then from there, guys just all came and gravitated. At one point, Jesse Ventura was working out at the gym, and just everybody seemed like was working out at the gym. And so, yeah, I guess that gets a lot of the credit. And then, yeah, I guess the minerals in the water up there, wink, wink.
It was unbelievable. I'm at the gym, and you don't even get your name on the board if you don't bench press 500. I mean, it was insane. This was 30 years ago. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
40 years ago. No, John, 40 years ago.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I saw Warlord one time. He had 320 on, and I remember it because he had the 3 wheels and a 2.5. And I thought, why has he got a 2.5 on there? And he backed up with it and bent over and did bent rows with it, and then racked it back. And I thought, you know what? This business might not be for me. I'm not sure that I need to go into this business.
Hey, well, it's a good thing you and I were in the gym together, because this is legit. I used to do in the rack and the death. I used to do shrugs and stuff, like, no kidding, 800-900 pounds for reps, shrugs, building the traps. It was insane. Yeah.
Wow.
You know what's amazing to me? I see all these young guys now, and I help work with kids in sports programs in low income areas. And all this training today, it's just garbage. It's multi-joint compound movement, same as Franco and Arnold did back in the 70s, that makes you strong. I know there's more stuff to it now, but a lot of this stuff is just window dressing.
Yep, to me. I'm with you. Yep.
We had Al Snow on. I don't know if you know Al, but Al, ordinary sized guy, and Al went into old school training, not even older than what John was talking about. He went back to the originators, with the bars and the wooden weights and all that stuff. And he's developed him a routine with that. The guy looks like $1 million, John. It's all from the old school training.
Yep,
he literally went back to Hackenschmidt and Gotch and those guys. Literally went back to the 1900 training manuals. Yeah, and he's training like that, and he looks amazing. He's like Jonathan Winters and Mork and Mindy, where you age backwards. We're all getting older and great. You talk about wrestlers climbing into the ring. Undertaker's retirement, he had a bunch of us had to get in the ring with him at the end, and all the guys were trying to do it off camera because we all thought we're going to trip and fall in the ring.
Don't trip on the ropes.
That's what I thought about when you said that. So, Nikita, now you're doing what obviously is the best work of your life. Tell us about your ministry and how it got started and what you're doing.
Yeah. So the short story on that, again, it's just kind of ties into my whole journey in terms of what's surreal, because it fits kind of right in even with how I broke into wrestling, not dreaming of being a wrestler. I've been thinking a million years, I'd be a minister, evangelist, or have a ministry. But the the amazing for me part of that story is, 11 months after I leave wrestling, I'm on this path of what's life hold next for Nikita Koloff. And it really, one of the greatest illustrations I have, if anyone out there has ever tried to put a puzzle together and there's that for some reason, there's one piece missing. There's just that light. You're like, the portrait's not complete without that one. Where is that one piece? It's kind of an illustration of my life. I'd had the success as a wrestler, become a world champion, the fame that kind of quote comes with that. And yet I leave wrestling. I'm like, what's life hold next? I'm like, something's still missing. And I'd met this Christian couple through other business ventures that I was in. I've always been big into diversifying and what I call MSIs. John, you probably familiar with that, multiple streams of income. And so I'd always diversified, had health clubs and other different types of investments. And they invited me to their church. I didn't grow up in church, just like I didn't grow up in Russia. If you viewers haven't figured that out yet, not from Russia, from Minnesota, but and so all that to say, I randomly called him up one day and said, I'll be there Sunday. And it was really just a divine appointment for me personally, kind of an aha moment of what was missing in my life. And, it was only 11 months off of television, big church, first one to the altar, and just surrender my life to the Lord, and encountered him. It was it was the real deal, a true conversion and becoming a Christ follower. And then just for 5 years, was mentored and discipled in that. Like Ivan mentored me in wrestling. Others embraced me. My pastor, Jay Stewart, still my pastor to this day since 1993. We have a meeting tomorrow. We meet every month. And then doors just began to open in 1998 to where, fast forward now to today, I've traveled currently to 30 different countries, all 50 states. I've preached or ministered revivals, crusades, etc., in over 1,200 churches around the world. The smallest audience of one, largest audience, actually Lex Luger with me in Jamaica, over 73,000 that we spoke to in Jamaica.
Wow.
Yeah, and then launched into men's ministry. Lex and I began to team up with men's ministry and a number of years ago, and for 16 or so years, so I do these conferences called Man Up Conferences. He and I do these camps together. People have been seeing the shirt, man Camp alumni. Every spring and fall, we do these camps together. We always bring small groups of men, and we're just going to talk to them about being healthy mentally, emotionally, physically, take all of our experiences as well as spiritually. And so written several books, working on another one, launched a radio show, podcast, TV show, and so it's just been a whirlwind of a journey, guys. It's just, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to just talk briefly about that. It's been amazing. It's been an amazing journey.
We talked about before air, I didn't know Lex before, but I know him now. And he is just one of the most pleasant guys. We had him on our show. He's just a pleasure to be around. When you see him, you just smile. He's always so, plus we both love football. So we got something to talk about with me, him and Rod Simmons, but it's just a pleasure to be around.
Yep. He is. He's evidence. I think I told you, but he's evidence. Anyone who knew him in those days, I call it BC, before Christ. Anyone who knew him in those days.
I've heard the stories.
Yeah. Hey, that character, Jerry, I don't know if that was your idea, the whole narcissist thing. I know you said the American Lex Express was a flop. I don't know about the whole narcissist thing, but that was pretty true to life to who he was.
That's correct.
By his own admission, he goes, I was pretty narcissistic, right? And had to rub that oil on him, and look pretty in the mirror, But anyone who knew him then knows him now, knows he is totally a different guy, and I just say, but God. So yeah.
Speaking of different guys, and backing up to Uncle Ivan now, he helped you through a lot of troubles, a lot of thick and thin. I believe even during your wife's illness with cancer, he was there for you. And then in his later life, you helped him see Christ there. Tell us a little bit about that.
I did. It was it's pretty cool. I mean, again, I feel very fortunate to what I've had the opportunity to do. He was very supportive and taking care of Mandy and understanding and walking away for a season of time to take care of her before I returned to the ring. And then post career, it's 1995, and I had a love for Ivan, and he was on my heart. Yeah, and Jerry, you know how it is. You're on the road, you kind of see how guys' lifestyles and what they do, and so I'm like, man, I want to reach out to Ivan, and I actually invited him to a revival that we're having in North Carolina, an evangelist out of South Africa. Really cool dude. I got to know and spent about 9 years with. Anyway, I invited Ivan, and I didn't know he was there. I didn't know he was there because it was going all week long until the end of the service, and he's standing at the altar, and I had no idea he was even in the building. And man, he had not unlike me a couple years prior. He had a genuine encounter that night. I mean, he literally, by his own story and his own admission, got set free that night of drug addiction, alcohol, tobacco addiction. I mean, all kinds of stuff. He was set free. I mean, you talk again, like Lex, a changed life. And then he went on to travel. We did some things together, some things in ministry, but and man, he carried a Bible everywhere he went. If somebody asked him about it, he had no problem telling them his story and how his life was changed. And right up to the day of his passing. And so him, I mean, I've been fortunate, him, Sting, Lex, Road Warrior Hawk, Animal. Those are just some of the guys, Magnum, that I've had the opportunity to play some role in their life transformation, in mentoring them after a similar decision, that I've had a small role in all of their lives and helping them in their new journeys. So Ivan just being one of those on that list. So yeah, pretty amazing. Don Cornotto, another one. Yeah, Johnny Weaver, another one.
Yeah. Wow.
Sting told me one time, it was really cool the way he said it was, he didn't have a 10-step program. He had a 1-step program. He found Jesus. He got off everything with that. It was pretty cool testimony, the way that he said it. I just saw him recently. We went on a Beatles tour in Liverpool recently. He was going somewhere, and I got to hop in with him. He's such a nice guy. I like being around him. But
yeah, quick funny backstory on that. So around that same time that Ivan comes to the altar and comes to the Lord, all the guys are in Charlotte, the Coliseum. Now it's December of 95. I leave in November of 93. I haven't seen any of them, and my life has changed. So I think, I'm going to go down to the Coliseum. I'd actually grown my hair out. I had a mullet, man, like full mullet. I shaved off all my facial hair. Most of the guys did not recognize me, like for real. They're like, I'm in the back like a mark. I'm like, hey, you're Hogan, man, I love you. They're like, who let this mark in here? Anyway, all that to say, I corralled Sting for about a half hour, and I just blew up all over him, and I'm like, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And he's like, hey, I got to go to the ring. And he told me later, I'm like, we're going to continue this conversation. In his mind, he was, oh, no, we're not, only to find out 3 years later, that he had that same encounter, and then spent 5 years or so flying out to Texas about once a quarter, and spent a few days at his house mentoring him and his family. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Down at the home of Killer Tim Brooks. He's in Waxahachie, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Got a ranch out there. Yep. So,
I just, for some reason, I just always, Killer was a great mentor to me, Killer Tim Brooks, Dick Murdoch's cousin. And he always from Waxahachie, Texas. He's the only person I ever knew from Waxahachie, Texas until Sting moved there.
That's amazing. Wow.
How do people, if people want to find out more about Man Up Ministry, if people want to go to one of these, what do people need to do?
So I try to keep it as simple as possible. So if they'll just log, and I'll send you guys some show notes too, if just Koloff.net, the last name Koloff, Koloff.net. On that website, there's a link to the Man Camp. If guys wanted to find out more information on the Man Camp that Lex and I facilitate, there's a link to the Man Up podcast. There's a link to the Man Up TV show. There's a store there where people are interested in. My last book was Nikita, A Tale of the Ring and Redemption. It's actually my life story, newly updated. I just added 7 or 8 new chapters to it. A motivational book called Wrestling with Success. Those are available right there on the store site. And of course, I personally sign anything that people order off of the store site, but it's all right there, Koloff.net. They can read more about the ministry, more about my wrestling life, and it's one stop.
Well, Nikita, I was so excited when Jerry told us that we're going to have you on the show. You know, we started the podcast just we enjoy talking to old guys like us. You know, we don't bury anybody. We just have fun. And I was so excited because I've never gotten the chance to meet you. And it's been a wonderful hour and a half or whatever it's been to get to meet you and learn more about your story and learn more about you. And I've enjoyed as much as looking at the old videos, getting ready for the show tonight, of all the stuff that you had done with Magnum, with Flair, with all the old interviews, the staying in character at the Rocky IV movie set. I just love that stuff. I think it's great. So thank you so much. It's a true honor to have you on the show.
It certainly is. John sent me a text about 11 o'clock last night. He said, this is going to be great. He said, I've been spending the last couple hours just watching old videos and interviews.
That's true.
Said, this is going to be great. I said, you're just finding it out. But we got to give a shout out to all of our friend, Mr. William Murdoch, Bill Murdoch, who wrote Jack's book, helped Jack co-author his book, and also assisted you in his book. Bill and you working together on some fantastic charities and seminars coming up. So look at Nikki's website and get all the information you need. And once again, thanks so much for coming on. What a thrill it's been, and getting to know you and wow, what a career.
Well, I'm honored to be with two legends like you guys. And hey, you better watch Stories with Brisco and Bradshaw, or the Russian Nightmare will hit you with the Russian sickle and you go down. Chateau.